The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Windsor Castle as Queen Camilla walked through the royal gardens, completely unaware that her world was about to change forever. She had been enjoying her position as queen consort for nearly 2 years now, ever since King Charles III's coronation. The role had given her a sense of purpose she had never experienced before, and she took great pride in her charitable work and public appearances inside the castle. However, a secret meeting was taking place in the ancient stone chambers that had witnessed centuries of royal drama. Commander Harrison, the head of the Royal Guard, sat across from several senior military officials and palace advisors. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension, and the weight of their discussion could have crushed mountains. "The situation has become untenable," Commander Harrison said, his weathered face showing the strain of sleepless nights. "The reports from our intelligence sources are deeply concerning. We cannot ignore what we have discovered about Her Majesty's activities." The documents spread across the mahogany table told a disturbing story. For months, the Royal Guard had been quietly investigating suspicious financial transactions linked to several of Queen Camilla's charity organizations. What they had uncovered was a web of corruption that reached far beyond simple mismanagement of funds. General Morrison, a decorated veteran with 40 years of service to the crown, leaned forward in his chair. "The evidence is overwhelming. She has been using her position to funnel money from royal charities into private accounts. But that's not the worst part. We have proof that she has been sharing sensitive royal family information with foreign contacts." The room fell silent, except for the ticking of an antique clock on the mantelpiece. Everyone present understood the gravity of what they were discussing. Treason was not a word thrown around lightly in the halls of British royalty, but there was no other way to describe what they had discovered. Colonel Williams, who had been quietly studying the documents, finally spoke up. "What does King Charles know about this?" His question hung in the air like a dark cloud, because everyone in the room knew the answer would complicate everything. "His Majesty knows nothing," Commander Harrison replied firmly. "And given his recent health concerns and the stress he's been under since becoming king, we believe this information could be devastating to him personally. The doctors have advised that any major shock could worsen his condition significantly." The health of the king had indeed been a closely guarded secret. While the public knew he had been dealing with some minor medical issues, the reality was far more serious. His doctors had warned that severe emotional stress could trigger complications that might threaten his ability to fulfill his royal duties. Dr. Pemberton, the royal physician who had been called to join this emergency meeting, confirmed their worst fears. "In my professional opinion, revealing this betrayal to His Majesty at this time could result in a complete breakdown. We're talking about potential heart problems, severe depression, or worse. The man has dedicated his entire life to the crown, and discovering that his wife has betrayed everything he stands for could literally kill him." As the men discussed the impossible situation they faced, none of them noticed the figure listening outside the heavy wooden door. Sarah Mitchell, one of Queen Camilla's personal assistants, had arrived early to deliver some documents when she heard the muffled voices from within. What she overheard made her blood run cold. Meanwhile, Prince William was in London, completely unaware of the storm brewing around his family. He had been focusing on his own royal duties and raising his children with Catherine. The idea that he might soon be thrust into a position of even greater responsibility had never crossed his mind. Back at Windsor, Queen Camilla continued her morning routine, stopping to chat with gardeners and staff members who had no idea they were speaking to someone whose days as royalty were numbered. She seemed genuinely happy, waving at tourists who had gathered outside the castle gates, taking photos, and signing autographs for children who had been waiting for hours to meet her. The irony was not lost on Commander Harrison as he watched her through the window during a break in their meeting. "She appears so normal, so dedicated to her role," he observed to General Morrison. "It makes what we have to do even more difficult." But the evidence against her was undeniable. Bank records showed that over the past year, more than £2 million had been diverted from royal charity accounts into offshore accounts connected to Queen Camilla. Phone records revealed regular contact with individuals who had connections to foreign intelligence services. Most damning of all, they had discovered copies of confidential royal family documents in her private safe. Documents that had no business being there. The final piece of evidence that sealed her fate was a recording obtained by MI5, the British intelligence service. In it, Queen Camilla could be heard discussing the private health information of King Charles with an unidentified contact, information that could be used to manipulate or blackmail the royal family. As the day wore on, the weight of their decision pressed down on everyone involved in the secret meeting. They were not just talking about removing a queen from her position. They were talking about potentially destroying a marriage, devastating a king, and shocking a nation that had grown to accept Camilla as part of their royal family. Commander Harrison knew that decisive action was necessary, but he also understood that they needed to handle this situation with extreme care. The monarchy itself could be at risk if news of Queen Camilla's betrayal became public in the wrong way. They needed a plan that would protect King Charles, preserve the dignity of the crown, and ensure that justice was served. As evening approached, the meeting concluded with a unanimous but heavy-hearted decision. They would move forward with their plan the very next day, but first, they needed to secure the cooperation of the one person who could make this transition possible without destroying everything the royal family stood for. They needed Prince William. The phone call came at midnight, jolting Prince William from a deep sleep. Catherine stirred beside him as he reached for his secure phone, the one reserved only for the most urgent royal business. Commander Harrison's grave voice on the other end immediately told William that something was terribly wrong. "Your Royal Highness, I apologize for the late hour, but we need you at Clarence House immediately. This concerns the security of the crown itself." The commander's words were carefully chosen, but William could hear the stress in his voice. In all his years of dealing with the Royal Guard, he had never heard Harrison sound so troubled. Within 30 minutes, Prince William was speeding through the empty London streets in an unmarked vehicle, his mind racing with possibilities. What could be so urgent that it couldn't wait until morning? Was his father ill? Had there been a security breach? The questions multiplied as they drove through the night. At Clarence House, William was escorted to a secure room where Commander Harrison, General Morrison, and several other officials he recognized but rarely spoke with were waiting. The serious expressions on their faces confirmed his worst fears that something significant had happened. "Sir," Commander Harrison began, "what I'm about to tell you will be difficult to hear, but we need your complete attention and your discretion." He gestured to a chair at the head of the table. "Please sit down." For the next hour, William listened in growing shock as the officials laid out their evidence against Queen Camilla. Documents, recordings, bank statements, and intelligence reports painted a picture of betrayal that seemed impossible to believe. His stepmother, the woman his father loved and had fought to marry, had been systematically stealing from royal charities and sharing confidential family information with foreign contacts. "This can't be real," William said, his voice barely above a whisper. "There has to be some mistake, some misunderstanding." But even as he spoke, pieces began falling into place. Camilla's recent interest in certain charity accounts, her private phone calls that stopped whenever someone entered the room, her questions about family matters that seemed innocent at the time. General Morrison slid a thick folder across the table. "I'm afraid there's no mistake, sir. We've spent months verifying every piece of evidence. We brought in outside experts to confirm our findings. The betrayal is real, and it's extensive." The weight of the situation hit William like a physical blow. Not only was his stepmother a traitor to the crown, but revealing this truth would destroy his father. King Charles had already endured so much criticism and stress since becoming monarch. The revelation that his beloved wife had betrayed him might be the final blow that broke him completely. "What about my father?" William asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Does he know anything about this?" Dr. Pemberton, who had remained silent during the evidence presentation, finally spoke. "His Majesty knows nothing, and we strongly advise that he must never know. His health has been more fragile than the public realizes. The shock of discovering his wife's betrayal could trigger a complete breakdown," possibly even a heart attack. William felt the enormous weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He was being asked to make decisions that would affect not just his family, but the entire monarchy. The irony wasn't lost on him that Queen Camilla's actions might force him into a position of greater power much sooner than anyone had anticipated. Commander Harrison leaned forward. "Sir, we need your help to handle this situation quietly and efficiently. We cannot allow this scandal to become public, both for the sake of the monarchy and for your father's health. We propose removing Queen Camilla from her position and installing you as the primary royal authority until your father can be gradually prepared for the truth." If ever the plan they outlined was complex but elegant in its simplicity. They would present Queen Camilla with the evidence of her crimes and give her a choice: face public trial and imprisonment, which would destroy the monarchy and potentially kill King Charles, or quietly step down from her royal duties and fade into obscurity. In exchange for her cooperation, she would be allowed to leave the country and live in exile, never to return to Britain. "And if she refuses?" William asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Then we proceed with a formal investigation and arrest," Commander Harrison replied grimly. "But that option would likely result in the end of the monarchy as we know it. The scandal would be impossible to contain, and your father's reaction could be fatal." William stood and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet London streets. Somewhere in the distance, his father was sleeping peacefully, unaware that his world was about to change forever. The decision William made in this room would determine not just his own future, but the future of the British crown itself. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" William finally asked. Turning back to face the group, General Morrison answered without hesitation. "We're asking you to accept the responsibilities of the crown immediately, to work with us to remove Queen Camilla quietly, and to help us protect your father from a truth that could kill him. Essentially, we need you to become the acting head of the royal family." The silence in the room stretched for several minutes as William processed everything he had learned. His entire life had been preparation for eventually taking on more royal responsibilities, but he had always imagined it would happen gradually, with his father's guidance and support. Instead, he was being thrust into leadership under the worst possible circumstances. Sarah Mitchell, Queen Camilla's assistant who had overheard the original meeting, had spent the entire day in agony. She had always been loyal to Queen Camilla, but the evidence of betrayal she had accidentally discovered left her torn between personal loyalty and duty to the crown as night fell. She made a decision that would change everything. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she had never called before. When Commander Harrison answered, she took a deep breath and said, "Sir, this is Sarah Mitchell. I work for Queen Camilla, and I think you should know that she's planning to leave the country tomorrow morning. I saw her packing and heard her making arrangements for a private flight." The revelation sent shockwaves through the room where William was still deliberating. If Queen Camilla fled before they could confront her, it would make the situation infinitely more complicated. They would lose any chance of containing the scandal, and the questions raised by her sudden disappearance would be impossible to answer without revealing the truth. Commander Harrison hung up the phone and looked directly at William. "Sir, we're out of time. We need your decision now. Queen Camilla plans to leave the country in the morning. If we're going to act, it has to be tonight." William closed his eyes and thought of his father, his wife, his children, and the millions of people who looked to the royal family for stability and leadership. When he opened his eyes, his decision was clear. The black vehicles pulled up to Windsor Castle at exactly 3 a.m., their headlights cutting through the early morning darkness like knives. Prince William sat in the lead car, his face set in grim determination. Behind him, Commander Harrison and a select team of the Royal Guard followed, each man understanding that they were about to make history in the most troubling way possible. Queen Camilla had indeed been preparing to leave the country. When the security team quietly entered her private quarters, they found suitcases packed and airline tickets on her dressing table. A quick search revealed even more damning evidence. Additional documents that proved her guilt beyond any doubt, including correspondence with foreign contacts that went back nearly 3 years. She was in her study, apparently destroying documents when they found her. The fireplace was burning despite the warm weather, and several partially burned papers lay scattered around her feet. When she looked up and saw Prince William standing in the doorway with the royal guard behind him, her face went completely white. "William," she said softly, her voice trembling, "what are you doing here at this hour?" But her eyes had already moved to the uniforms behind him, and the dawning realization of why they had come was written clearly across her face. "Hello, Camilla," William replied, his voice steady but cold. "I think you know why we're here." He gestured to Commander Harrison, who stepped forward with a thick folder of evidence. For the next 30 minutes, they presented everything they had discovered: bank records, phone transcripts, intelligence reports, and photographs that showed her meetings with foreign contacts. With each piece of evidence, Queen Camilla seemed to shrink further into her chair, the weight of her crimes pressing down on her like a physical force. "How long have you known?" she finally asked, her voice barely audible. "Long enough," Commander Harrison answered. "The question now is what happens next. We can handle this quietly, or we can handle this publicly. The choice is yours." William watched his stepmother carefully as she processed her options. Part of him felt genuine sadness for her situation, but a larger part felt anger at how she had betrayed his father's trust and put the entire royal family at risk. King Charles had fought so hard for the right to marry her, had endured years of criticism and public scrutiny, and she had repaid his devotion with treachery. "What do you want from me?" Queen Camilla asked, looking directly at William rather than the military officials surrounding her. "Your resignation from all royal duties, effective immediately," William replied without hesitation. "You will renounce your title as Queen Consort, and you will leave Britain permanently. In exchange, we will not pursue criminal charges, and we will create a cover story that protects both you and my father from public scandal." The offer was generous considering the severity of her crimes, but it came with conditions that would effectively end her life as she had known it for the past several years. She would lose her title, her position, her home, and most importantly, her husband. King Charles would be told that she had decided to step back from royal duties due to health concerns and had chosen to live abroad for her recovery. "And if I refuse?" she asked, though they all knew it wasn't really a question. General Morrison answered bluntly. "Then you will be arrested for treason, theft, and espionage. Your trial will be public, every detail of your crimes will be in the newspapers, and your husband will learn the truth in the most humiliating way possible. The monarchy might not survive the scandal." Queen Camilla stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the grounds where she had spent so many happy moments over the past few years. The gardens she had helped design, the paths she had walked with King Charles, the rooms where they had entertained world leaders and dignitaries. All of it was about to become nothing more than memories. "How much time do I have?" she asked finally. "You leave today," William said firmly. "A private plane is being prepared. You'll be taken to a location where you can live comfortably but quietly. All communication with British officials, including my father, will be cut off permanently." The reality of her situation was finally sinking in completely. She would never see King Charles again, never return to Britain, never attend another royal function or charity event. Her life as Queen Consort was over, and she had only herself to blame. Sarah Mitchell, who had been waiting anxiously outside, was called in to help pack the remaining items Queen Camilla would be allowed to take. The young assistant had been crying since making the phone call that sealed her employer's fate, torn between relief that the truth had come out and sadness for the woman she had served loyally. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered as she folded clothes into a suitcase. "I couldn't let you destroy the royal family." Queen Camilla looked at her assistant with something that might have been understanding. "You did the right thing," she said quietly. "I lost my way somewhere along the line. I forgot what was important." As dawn began to break over Windsor Castle, the final preparations were made. Queen Camilla signed documents officially renouncing her title and all claims to royal privileges. She handed over her official jewelry, including pieces that had been specially made for her coronation. Most painfully, she removed her wedding ring and placed it on the table where William could return it to his father when the time was right. The hardest part was writing the letter to King Charles. She sat at her desk for nearly an hour, starting and stopping several times, trying to find words that would explain her sudden departure without revealing the truth that could destroy him. Finally, she wrote simply that her health required immediate attention abroad, that she loved him deeply, and that she hoped he would understand her need to step away from royal duties permanently. "Will you give this to him?" she asked William, holding out the sealed envelope. William took the letter, knowing it would be one of the most difficult things he would ever have to deliver to his father. "I'll make sure he gets it when the time is right." As the sun rose fully above the horizon, Queen Camilla took one last look around the rooms that had been her home. She walked slowly through the halls where portraits of previous monarchs watched silently, past the throne room where she had stood beside King Charles during important ceremonies, and through the gardens where they had spent countless peaceful mornings together. At exactly 7 a.m., the vehicles that would take her to the airport pulled up to a side entrance of the castle. Queen Camilla, no longer entitled to that name, climbed into the back seat with only 2 suitcases and a small bag of personal items. She did not look back as they drove away from Windsor Castle for the last time. Commander Harrison turned to Prince William as the vehicles disappeared from view. "It's done, sir, but now comes the harder part. We need to prepare you for what happens next." William nodded grimly, knowing that removing Queen Camilla was only the beginning. Now they faced the challenge of explaining her absence to King Charles, managing the public's questions, and preparing William to take on responsibilities he had never expected to handle so soon. The crown was safe, but at a cost that would echo through the royal family for generations to come. King Charles woke up that morning completely unaware that his life had changed forever during the night. He reached across the bed, expecting to find Camilla beside him as he had every morning for years, but found only empty sheets and cold pillows. Assuming she had risen early for one of her charity commitments, he went about his normal routine, expecting to see her at breakfast. When she didn't appear in the dining room, Charles began to worry. Camilla was punctual to a fault, especially for their private meals together. He asked the staff about her whereabouts, but they seemed unusually nervous and uncertain in their responses. Something was wrong, but no one seemed willing or able to tell him what it was. Prince William arrived at the palace shortly after 9 a.m., carrying the weight of what he had to do like a physical burden. He found his father in the garden, reading the morning papers and clearly puzzled by Camilla's absence. The sight of King Charles looking so peaceful and content made William's task even more heartbreaking. "William!" King Charles smiled warmly as his son approached. "Perfect timing. Have you seen Camilla this morning? She seems to have vanished, and no one can tell me where she's gone." He chuckled, still completely innocent of the truth. "You know how she is about her surprises. I suspect she's planning something for our anniversary next month." William sat down heavily in the chair across from his father, trying to find the strength to deliver news that would shatter the man's world. The letter from Camilla felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in his jacket pocket, but he knew he couldn't simply hand it over without any preparation. "Father," William began carefully, "we need to talk. Something has happened that you need to know about." The change in King Charles's expression was immediate. Years of royal training had taught him to recognize when serious news was coming, and William's tone made it clear that whatever had happened was significant. He folded his newspaper and gave his son his complete attention. "What's wrong?" King Charles asked, his voice steady but filled with growing concern. "Is it one of the children? Catherine?" "No, everyone is fine," William said quickly, then paused, realizing how inadequate that assurance was given what he was about to reveal. "It's about Camilla." For the next hour, William carefully delivered a modified version of the truth. He explained that Camilla had been dealing with serious health issues that she had hidden from everyone, including King Charles. He told his father that she had made the difficult decision to seek long-term treatment abroad, away from the pressures and scrutiny of royal life. Most painfully, he explained that her condition required complete isolation from stress, which meant she could not maintain contact with the royal family during her recovery. King Charles listened in growing shock and disbelief. "But she seemed fine," he kept saying. "We were together just yesterday. She was laughing, making plans for next week." How could she be so ill without me knowing? William handed him Camilla's letter, watching his father's face as he read her carefully crafted words. The letter spoke of love and sacrifice, of difficult decisions made for the good of the monarchy, and of her hope that Charles would understand and forgive her for leaving so suddenly. It was masterfully written to suggest health problems without being specific enough to invite questions that couldn't be answered. "She's really gone?" King Charles asked, his voice breaking slightly. "Just like that? Without even saying goodbye?" "She left very early this morning," William confirmed. "She felt that a prolonged goodbye would be too painful for both of you and might interfere with her recovery." The explanation was plausible enough to be believable, especially coming from William, whom King Charles trusted absolutely, but it still left the monarch reeling from the sudden loss of his companion and partner. In the span of an hour, he had gone from expecting to see his wife at breakfast to learning that she had left the country permanently for medical treatment. Meanwhile, across London, an emergency meeting was taking place in the offices of the Royal Guard. Commander Harrison was briefing a select group of senior officials about the new reality they all faced. With Queen Camilla gone, significant changes needed to be made to royal protocols and procedures. "His Royal Highness Prince William will be taking on additional responsibilities immediately," Commander Harrison announced. "Given His Majesty's emotional state and the delicate nature of this transition, Prince William will effectively be serving as the primary royal authority for public functions and state business." The announcement was unprecedented in modern royal history. While princes had often taken on increased duties to support aging monarchs, William was essentially being asked to assume many of the powers of kingship while his father remained officially on the throne. It was a delicate balance that would require careful management and absolute discretion from everyone involved. General Morrison raised the obvious concern. What happens when people start asking questions about the Queen Consort's absence? "The media will notice immediately that she's not appearing at scheduled events. We've prepared a comprehensive cover story," Commander Harrison replied. "Her Majesty has been dealing with exhaustion and stress-related health issues. She is taking an extended leave of absence on doctor's orders to focus on her recovery. The location of her treatment will remain private for security and medical confidentiality reasons." It was a story that would satisfy most casual inquiries. But they all knew that investigative journalists and royal watchers would eventually start digging deeper. The success of their deception would depend largely on how well Prince William could step into his expanded role and how convincingly the royal family could present a united front during this transition. Back at the palace, King Charles was struggling to process his new reality. He had always known that royal life involved sacrifice and duty, but losing Camilla felt like losing a part of himself. She had been his anchor through the difficult transition from Prince of Wales to King, his closest advisor, and his most trusted companion. Dr. Pemberton arrived in the afternoon to check on King Charles's condition, ostensibly as part of his regular medical care, but actually to assess how well the monarch was handling the stress of Camilla's departure. What he found was concerning but not unexpected. King Charles was showing clear signs of emotional distress, elevated blood pressure, irregular sleep patterns, and a general state of anxiety that could easily develop into something more serious if not carefully managed. The doctor prescribed mild sedatives and recommended reducing the king's official duties for the immediate future. Advice that played perfectly into their plan to have William take on more responsibilities. "I keep thinking I should call her," King Charles confided to Dr. Pemberton during his examination. "But William says she can't receive calls during her treatment. It doesn't feel real. Yesterday morning she was here making plans for our garden party next month, and now she's gone indefinitely." Dr. Pemberton, who was one of the few people who knew the full truth, felt genuinely sorry for the king. Charles was mourning the loss of his wife while being told it was for medical reasons he couldn't question or challenge. It was a cruel deception, but one that was necessary to protect him from an even more devastating truth. As evening fell on this first day of the new reality, Prince William found himself in the unique position of effectively running the British Monarchy while his father grieved for a wife who was still alive but could never return. The weight of the secrets he now carried, the responsibilities he had suddenly inherited, and the knowledge that this was likely just the beginning of a long and difficult transition made him feel older than his years. Catherine, who had been told a modified version of the truth that protected her from the full details of Camilla's betrayal, tried to offer support and comfort. But she could see that her husband was carrying burdens that went far beyond what he was able to share with her. And that worried her deeply. The first day had ended. But everyone involved knew that the real challenges were just beginning. They had successfully removed a traitor from the heart of the royal family. But now they faced the much more difficult task of maintaining their deception while rebuilding the monarchy around Prince William's expanded role. 3 weeks after Queen Camilla's disappearance, the British media was beginning to ask uncomfortable questions. Royal correspondent Emma Patterson had been investigating the sudden absence of the Queen Consort, and her inquiries were getting closer to the truth than anyone in the palace was comfortable with. "The official story doesn't add up," Patterson told her editor during their morning meeting. "I've checked with every major medical facility in Europe and North America. None of them have any record of treating anyone matching the Queen Consort's description. Either she's being treated under a completely false identity, or she's not receiving medical treatment at all." Her investigation had already uncovered several inconsistencies in the palace's official statements. Flight records showed a private royal aircraft had left Britain on the morning of Camilla's disappearance, but its destination was listed as a small airport in Switzerland that primarily served wealthy individuals seeking privacy rather than medical patients seeking treatment. Prince William was acutely aware of the growing media pressure. Every public appearance brought new questions about his stepmother's condition and when she might return to her royal duties. The stress of maintaining the deception while taking on his expanded responsibilities was beginning to show, despite his best efforts to appear confident and in control. The weekly meetings with the Royal Guard had become a lifeline for William, the only place where he could speak openly about the challenges he faced. During one particularly difficult session, Commander Harrison brought news that made everyone's blood run cold. "We've intercepted communications suggesting that foreign intelligence services are aware of Queen Camilla's sudden departure," Harrison reported grimly. "They're asking questions about what really happened, and some of them may have been in contact with her during her exile. The possibility that Queen Camilla might reveal royal secrets to foreign powers, either voluntarily or under pressure, added a new dimension of danger to their situation. She had been allowed to leave quietly to protect the monarchy, but if she decided to speak publicly about her experiences or share information with hostile nations, the very institution they had tried to save could still be destroyed." General Morrison presented an even more troubling development. "Our sources indicate that she's been making inquiries about returning to Britain. She claims to have information that could embarrass the royal family if she's not allowed to resume her position." The threat of blackmail from Queen Camilla herself was something they had hoped to avoid by allowing her to leave with dignity. But isolation and possibly regret had apparently made her desperate enough to consider using whatever secrets she still possessed as leverage to force her way back into royal life. King Charles, meanwhile, was struggling with depression that seemed to deepen with each passing day. The official explanation for his reduced public schedule was that he was supporting his wife's recovery by maintaining a lighter workload, but the reality was that he was barely functional. Dr. Pemberton had increased his medications and was seeing him daily, but the emotional toll of losing Camilla was proving harder to treat than anyone had anticipated. "He keeps asking when he can visit her," Dr. Pemberton reported to William during one of their confidential meetings. "The not knowing where she is or how she's doing is eating him alive. I'm genuinely worried about his mental health." William faced an impossible dilemma. His father was suffering terribly from the separation, but revealing the truth about Camilla's betrayal could destroy him completely. The fiction they had created to protect King Charles was itself becoming a source of serious harm. But there seemed to be no way out that didn't involve even greater risks. The situation became even more complicated when Sarah Mitchell, Queen Camilla's former assistant requested a private meeting with Prince William. She had been struggling with guilt over her role in exposing her former employer, and she had information that could change everything. "Your Royal Highness," Sarah began nervously when they met in a secure room at Clarence House, "there's something I didn't tell you before. Something I found in Queen Camilla's private papers that I think you need to know about." What Sarah revealed made William's blood run cold. Hidden among Queen Camilla's personal documents, she had discovered evidence that King Charles himself might have been aware of some of his wife's questionable activities. Not the extent of her betrayal, but enough to suggest that he had chosen to ignore warning signs rather than confront her directly. "There were bank statements that His Majesty had signed," Sarah explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "Authorizations for charity transfers that would have required his personal approval. I don't think he knew what she was really doing, but he might have suspected something was wrong." The implications were staggering. If King Charles had any knowledge of questionable financial activities but had failed to investigate or report them, he could be seen as complicit in his wife's crimes. The monarchy they were trying to protect could be damaged even more severely if it appeared that the king himself had been involved in or had covered up criminal activity. William spent the next several days in intense consultations with legal experts, trying to understand exactly what his father might have known and what his legal exposure might be. What they discovered was troubling but not catastrophic. King Charles had indeed signed authorizations for several large charity transfers, but the documentation suggested he had been told they were for legitimate purposes and had trusted his wife's explanations. "He's guilty of poor oversight and excessive trust, but not criminal conspiracy," the royal legal advisor concluded. "However, if this information becomes public, it will still be damaging to his reputation and to the monarchy as a whole." As if the situation wasn't complex enough, international pressure was beginning to build. Several foreign governments had made discreet inquiries about Queen Camilla's whereabouts, citing security concerns and the need to verify that she hadn't been coerced or harmed. The longer her absence continued without proper explanation, the more likely it became that formal diplomatic pressure would force Britain to provide answers they couldn't give. Commander Harrison called an emergency meeting to address what he termed the endgame scenario. The various pressures, media investigation, foreign intelligence interest, King Charles's deteriorating condition, and the threat of blackmail from Queen Camilla herself were converging in a way that made their current strategy unsustainable. "We have three options," Harrison laid out starkly. "We can continue with our current approach and hope we can outlast the pressure, which is becoming increasingly unlikely. We can reveal partial truth about Queen Camilla's crimes while continuing to protect His Majesty's health and reputation. Or we can take more decisive action to ensure that Queen Camilla can never threaten the monarchy again." The third option sent chills through everyone in the room. While no one spoke it aloud, they all understood what decisive action might mean. Queen Camilla possessed knowledge that could destroy the British monarchy, and she was apparently willing to use that knowledge to force her way back into power. William found himself facing decisions that no prince had ever been forced to make. The choices he made in the coming days would determine not just his own future, but the future of the crown itself. And with each passing hour, those choices were becoming more limited and more desperate, the weight of protecting his father, preserving the monarchy and maintaining the deception they had created was pushing William to his breaking point. But he also knew that millions of people depended on the stability and continuity that the royal family represented. Whatever personal cost he might have to pay, he couldn't allow one person's betrayal to destroy an institution that had survived for over 1,000 years. As he stood in his study late that night, looking out at London sleeping peacefully below, Prince William made a decision that would change everything. The time for half measures and temporary solutions had passed. If they were going to save the monarchy, they would have to be willing to do whatever was necessary, no matter how difficult or dangerous it might be. The decisive moment came on a cold Thursday morning in October, exactly 1 month after Queen Camilla's removal. Prince William received an encrypted message that changed everything. The message was from Queen Camilla herself, delivered through intermediaries, and it contained a threat that left no room for further negotiation. She demanded immediate reinstatement to her royal position, complete restoration of her titles and privileges, and a public statement explaining her absence as temporary medical leave. In exchange for these demands, she offered to remain silent about what she called certain irregularities in royal financial management that could implicate King Charles himself, but if her demands were not met within 72 hours, she threatened to hold a press conference revealing everything she knew about royal family secrets, including information that could destabilize the British government and damage international relationships. She had clearly spent her month in exile planning her return very carefully. Prince William called an emergency meeting of the inner circle that had managed the crisis from the beginning. Commander Harrison, General Morrison, Dr. Pemberton, and the royal legal team gathered in a secure location to discuss what everyone recognized as the endgame of their carefully constructed deception. "She's backed us into a corner," General Morrison said bluntly. "If we give in to her demands, we're essentially rewarding treason and setting a precedent that royal family members can blackmail their way out of consequences. But if we refuse, she could destroy everything we've worked to protect." Commander Harrison had been conducting his own investigation during Queen Camilla's exile, and his findings painted an even darker picture than they had originally understood. "Our intelligence sources have confirmed that she's been in contact with foreign agents since leaving Britain. She's not just threatening to reveal royal secrets. She's potentially been sharing them already. The revelation that Queen Camilla might have already committed additional acts of treason while in exile eliminated any sympathy the group might have felt for her situation. She had been given a chance to disappear quietly and live in comfortable exile, but instead she had apparently continued her betrayal of British interests and was now attempting to blackmail her way back into power. Dr. Pemberton provided the final piece of information that shaped their decision. "His Majesty's condition has deteriorated significantly. The stress of the separation, combined with his reduced public role, has triggered a serious depressive episode. I'm genuinely concerned about his ability to handle any additional shock or stress." Prince William had spent the previous month gradually taking on more royal responsibilities, and the British public had responded positively to his increased visibility and leadership. Polling showed that his approval ratings were higher than they had ever been, while questions about Queen Camilla's absence were becoming less frequent as people became accustomed to seeing William in the prominent role. "The public has essentially already accepted the transition," the palace communications director reported. "Prince William is being viewed as the de facto head of the royal family, and there's strong support for him taking on even greater responsibilities if needed." With all the information laid out before them, Prince William made the decision that would define the rest of his life and the future of the British monarchy. Rather than give in to Queen Camilla's blackmail or risk her revealing royal secrets, they would take a different approach entirely. "We're going to tell the truth," William announced, surprising everyone in the room. "Not the whole truth, but enough truth to neutralize her threats and protect the monarchy." The plan William outlined was bold and risky, but it offered the possibility of finally ending the crisis permanently. They would hold their own press conference, revealing that Queen Camilla had been removed from her position due to financial irregularities and security concerns. They would present enough evidence to justify her removal without revealing the full extent of her treachery. And they would announce that Prince William was formally taking on expanded royal duties to ensure the stability of the monarchy. "What about His Majesty?" Dr. Pemberton asked. "How do we protect him from the shock of learning the truth?" William's answer showed just how much the crisis had changed him and how seriously he now took his responsibility to protect both his father and the crown. "We don't tell him everything at once. We gradually prepare him for a modified version of the truth, one that emphasizes Queen Camilla's financial problems rather than her betrayal. And we make it clear that his health and well-being are the monarchy's top priority." The press conference was scheduled for the following Monday, giving them the weekend to prepare their statement and coordinate with law enforcement agencies who would need to be ready to respond to Queen Camilla's inevitable reaction when Monday morning arrived. Prince William stood before the assembled media and delivered a statement that was both honest and protective. He revealed that Queen Camilla had been removed from her royal duties due to serious financial improprieties involving royal charities, that investigations had revealed security concerns that made her continued presence in the royal family untenable, and that she had chosen to leave Britain rather than face formal criminal proceedings. "The monarchy must always be above reproach," William said, looking directly into the cameras. "When that standard is not met, swift action must be taken to protect the integrity of the Crown and the interests of the British people." He went on to announce that he was formally accepting expanded responsibilities as the senior working member of the royal family, with his father's full support and blessing. King Charles, who had been carefully prepared for this moment over the preceding days, appeared briefly to confirm his continued reign while acknowledging his son's increased role in day-to-day royal operations. The public reaction was overwhelmingly positive. Rather than being shocked by the removal of Queen Camilla, most people expressed relief that swift action had been taken to address problems within the royal family. Prince William was praised for his leadership and integrity, and his expanded role was seen as a natural evolution of royal responsibilities. Queen Camilla's threats to hold her own press conference never materialized. Faced with the reality that her crimes had already been made public and that her credibility had been destroyed, she apparently decided that further exposure would only make her legal situation worse. She remained in exile, her threats neutered and her power to harm the monarchy eliminated. King Charles, while saddened by the revelation of his wife's betrayal, actually seemed relieved to finally understand why she had left so suddenly. The truth, even a modified version of it, was easier for him to accept than the uncertainty and confusion that had plagued him for weeks. 6 months later, the crisis that had threatened to destroy the British monarchy was largely forgotten by the public. Prince William had seamlessly transitioned into his expanded role, earning praise from world leaders, the media, and the British people for his steady leadership during difficult times. The Royal Guard and security services had quietly strengthened their oversight procedures to prevent similar betrayals in the future. New protocols were put in place to monitor financial activities, communications, and access to sensitive information by all members of the royal family. Most importantly, the monarchy had survived its greatest internal threat in modern history. Through careful planning, decisive action, and Prince William's willingness to accept enormous responsibilities before he had planned to do so, the crown remained stable and respected. As Prince William stood on the balcony of Buckingham Palace during his father's next birthday celebration, waving to the crowds gathered below, he reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. The weight of leadership that had been thrust upon him so suddenly had become a natural part of who he was, and he knew that the British people were ready to follow him wherever the future might lead. The monarchy had been tested by betrayal and emerged stronger than ever, ready to serve the British people for generations to come.